stay with the visuals from the UN Security Council as well as what's taking place in court and bring in to the conversation SABC News specialist correspondent Sophie Mokoena, who was in fact listening to what was taking place there. And Sophie, good evening to you and thank you so much for your time. When you listen to largely what is coming out from that meeting is condemnation, unhappiness, concern about what took place at the weekend. But the other big question is the significance of this meeting and how far does it go?
Well, I think there are two issues here in terms of those who have spoken. For example, you have a situation where some who presented, representatives of different countries, are focusing on the leadership of President Nicolas Maduro in terms of style of leadership and what he has done, and also the issues that are related to elections last year that were disputed, and therefore saying that you have to address that issue. However, that issue, it's an internal matter of Venezuela because election processes are internal matters of a particular country at that time. And the institutions of that country have to deal with those who are aggrieved with the electoral outcome. You cannot invade the country because there's a dispute of elections in that country. The UN Charter, Article 1 and 2, is clear where you can use external force to pressure a particular country. And that authorization has to come from the Security Council. For example, even though people have different interpretation of what was the resolution when Gaddafi was killed, that was adopted at the Security Council, many are saying that resolution was clear, that this was going to lead to the assassination or regime change in Libya. Others are saying not, because some of them were found wanting, like South Africa was found wanting. They agreed to that resolution, and Gaddafi died. The leadership at that time say now they were not aware that it will be abused, but the resolution was clear. So there are those issues that you look at in terms of intervention. You cannot settle an electoral dispute with military intervention. That is why even countries are being condemned when they use their military to suppress the voice of the opposition. So it has to apply on both cases. While others are looking at, for example, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who was in South Africa last year at the time when we had the G20, saying that forget about the issue of internal affairs. Let's focus on the invasion and the military action. That's the role of the UN to look at that right now, because there was a violation of the UN Charter, Article 1 and 2. They both speak to territorial independence and sovereignty of countries. And therefore, you find people who want to look at internal issues to justify. Others are saying, yes, we have internal issues, but that doesn't justify what America has done. Whether you like it or not, America has violated the United Nations Charter, Article 1 and 2. And the UN Charter was drafted after the Second World War to ensure that no country invade another country, which leads to a world war. Like we saw during the First World War, the failure of the League of Nations in 1914, and of course, the Second World War. Then after the Second World War, there was this charter that was put together to manage the global affairs as it relates to peace and security. And the establishment of the Security Council. The UN went further to start an international court of justice where countries, when they have disputes, they can go there to settle their disputes.
And Sophie, you speak about the violation, right, of the laws. I'd like to borrow from what, the representative of Colombia actually said about this very matter. She says, if a country that is a permanent member disregards the international law, then what is this council for? Continues to even say the law and the international law, as well as the systems, cannot only be disregarded and allow the strongest to prevail against multilateral agreements that we have all made here. And it speaks to that very issue that you speak about, to say that if you have a permanent member acting this way, then what does it all mean then?
Exactly. We've had loud calls for the transformation of the UN Security Council in particular. That is why countries are saying, you, the victors of the Second World War, you established this organ, the Security Council, looking at you yourself benefiting. That's why the P5 allocated themselves veto powers. The world has changed. You have more members, and many people played a role, and you ignore them. Now it's time to change because the world has changed. For example, you look at regions such as Africa are not represented as permanent members of the Security Council. So these P5 members, they are bullies. They do as they please, and they take decisions based on their personal interest, not in the interest of the world peace. That is why there were divisions when the matter of Ukraine and Russia was put before the Security Council, because those who were supporting Russia exercised their veto power to stop the resolutions. We see it happening with the Middle East. Those supporting Israel are using their veto power, America in this case, to stop resolutions aimed at stopping the killing of Palestinians and the humanitarian crisis in the Middle East. So in this case, it's going to be the same. Come end of the day, people are going to use veto powers, those who have been assigned to represent their countries. You will see some abstaining because they are so scared of superpowers. They don't want to find themselves in the wrong side of superpowers. Others will be using their veto power to fight for the principle of a just world and multilateralism. Unfortunately, the 5 members will then, I can't see the 5 members agreeing. America is part of this. America is going to veto whatever will be presented as a resolution.
And Sophie, right in the middle of that, there is a concern which has been expressed during the weekend, even by some representatives here in the Security Council, of instability in the region, given this latest development.
Yes, we know that countries such as Mexico, Chile, including Brazil, a BRICS member, but also IPSA member, India, Brazil, South Africa, raising concern that this will lead to political and security challenges in the region. It will. We heard what Colombia said. They are mobilizing. They are moving towards the coastal line of Venezuela to go and defend Venezuela. We heard what Cuba said. Cuba has lost 30 members who were part of the security personnel of Nicolas Maduro. And therefore, you can see now Cuba has been affected because they were giving support to Venezuela as a sister country or an alliance member. And therefore, you heard even what China said, because the United States of America, when you listen to these leaders of the US, whether you speak about the Secretary of Defense, he says something about the military intervention. You listen to the State Department, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. He's saying something, but Marco Rubio, I remember the former South African president, when he was delivering Aziz Pahad lecture last year, he warned us that the first statement of Marco Rubio are alarm bells to the world, because they want to return to the Monroe Doctrine, where they want to be in charge of Latin America, but also to challenge, even if it means militarily so, any country that stands in front of their personal interest. That's the president as it relates to oil and resources. That's what he said. They are going to take the oil of Venezuela. They are going to make money. Yes, they will assist Venezuela to develop, and they will also share oil with other countries. I think referring to China and Russia, who are already helping Venezuela, but also singling out Iran as an enemy who is part of those countries that are exploring or operating or cooperating with Venezuela. Yeah. So you can see there's so much, but whether you like it or not, the world is in crisis, and this was predicted by the UN Secretary General in 2014 when he came to South Africa to lobby South Africa in terms of the agenda of G20. I spoke to him exclusively. He said, the world is in crisis. There's no leadership.
And Sophie, you're mentioning the history, right? And I want us to take the graphics before I let you go, because this is not something that started at the weekend. It's been going on. There's been a lot happening between relations as far as the US and Venezuela is concerned, steadily deteriorating. I mean, let's take it back to that failed coup on April 11th, 2002, when Hugo Chavez was removed for about 47 hours and brought back.
Yes, you'd recall Venezuelans put a heavy fight in the streets demanding the release of Chavez, and it was the military at that time internally, and he was brought back. Now, this time around, you have another country who has abducted a leader of people, even though it's not all section of this population who would support Maduro, and taking him to New York. Now, the issue here is also when you send someone to be tried in another country, there are legal processes that must ensue. And you have to also involve Interpol. You have to speak to that country, and the law enforcement and the institutions of that country must approve handing over of any fugitive. This is something that didn't happen. America went there, abducted the Venezuelan president and the wife, and now they are trying him in a foreign land, foreign court, and the question of jurisdiction comes to play, because the issue is about those military capability that he has, or the guns that he has, or machine guns, whatever you call them, of high caliber. The question is it allowed in Venezuela? Yes, you may have a situation where they have been outlawed in America, but in Venezuela it might be a different case. For example, in South Africa, the AK-47, much as it was used to liberate the country, it's not an official gun that's allowed, or military capability allowed. Not even our military forces use it. And therefore, when you have AK-47, you are breaking the law of this country. But in other countries, it is allowed. Therefore, that's why the issue of whether this court has got powers to try him. Secondly, if it has to do with human rights violation, you have the Human Rights Commission that must lodge complaint and then get in touch with the law enforcement agencies, and the UN must be involved, the Security Council must be involved, and the ICC, International Criminal Court, if it has a jurisdiction, can then start investigation and call for arrest of that person, like we've seen in other cases. Or if it is a country, America, that is not happy about Venezuela as a country under the leadership of President Maduro, they have to go to International Court of Justice, because it deals with dispute amongst countries.
And Sophie, as we speak, let's take you back to the Security Council. Venezuela is speaking.